Subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon to never miss an update from RAU'S.
Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why and how of newspaper analysis from the perspective of UPSC Civil Services Examination. Today we have taken up Delhi edition of The Hindu newspaper dated 13th of January 2021. Today's session will be co-presented by me and Mr. Basava Uppin. The articles included in today's discussion are displayed on your screen. Let us now begin the discussion.
Before we jump into today's discussion, here are a few statements displayed on your screen which you have to find out based on today's discussion whether they are true or false. The solutions to these statements have been given right at the end of the video. So the first article which we have taken for today's discussion appears on page number 6. Reclaiming SAARC from the ashes of 2020. Now in this particular article, the author Suhasini Heather, who is a prominent writer as far as international relation of India with the world is concerned, has tried to lay the significance on SAARC in overall scheme of things for India. In the past 5 to 7 years, we have seen how the significance and activity within SAARC has declined drastically, and that was mainly due to the acrimony between India and Pakistan. And so this article gives us an opportunity to prepare a very important topic from the perspective of GS Paper 2 International Relation, where you can clearly see India and its neighborhood relations, bilateral, regional and global groupings and agreements involving India or affecting India's interests. Now discussions and articles like these have been very important in the past. For example, UPSC in its most recent mains examination, that is UPSC Mains 2020, under paper 2 asked a question critically examining the role of WHO in providing global health security during the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, how the actions and the steps taken by WHO in the wake of COVID-19 has been under radar throughout this year. And to no one's surprise, we have discussed this issue in our Daily News Simplified many times, and this is one of those instances where on 30th of March 2020 an article appeared critically examining the functioning of the WHO as far as the management of COVID-19 pandemic is concerned, where we discussed some prelims related information related to WHO, but we also extensively discussed the powers which already are with WHO and how WHO chose to use those powers, and how it appeared that WHO is constantly playing alongside China in overall COVID-19 scenario. And since SAARC has been one of the most important multilateral platform as far as South Asia is concerned, we are going to first throw some light on prelims related facts dealing with SAARC, and then we will discuss two important things from the perspective of mains examination. First, what are the reasons behind the failure of SAARC, mainly the disputes related to Pakistan, the giantness or the prominence of India in the South Asian region, other disputes apart from India and Pakistan, and the incongruity of the political system of this region. But finally, we will go and delve into the main arguments raised by the author in this particular discussion, where she talks about how relevant and how important SAARC still remains for India in particular and for South Asian region in general. Let us now begin the discussion. So let us now quickly go over to the facts for prelims examination. As we all know, the full form of SAARC is South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation, and it was founded in 1985 in Dhaka. But its secretariat is located in Kathmandu, Nepal. It is important to remember that it is not a stakeholders organization, rather it is an intergovernmental organization, which means that the member states send the representatives of the government to the official meetings. And if we talk about the members, they are Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Maldives, Nepal, Pakistan and Sri Lanka. It is also important to remember the last summit. So the last summit was in 2014 in Kathmandu, Nepal, although another summit was called in 2016 in Islamabad, Pakistan, but it was cancelled due to non-participation of not only India but 2-3 other members as well. Now when the SAARC was conceptualized, there were high hopes from it. It was envisioned that this platform will enable the integration of South Asian region and bring about peace and tranquility in this part of the world. But it has failed to do that. And hence it is important for us to understand the reasons behind it. So the reasons behind the failure of SAARC can be broadly segregated into causes attributable to Pakistan, then some can also be attributed to India, then there are a lot of disputes apart from India-Pakistan disputes, and then of course the issue of heterogeneity of political systems in this part of the world. And we will go into each one of them one by one. So Pakistan has always been a problematic member of SAARC. And there are 3 counts on which Pakistan can be held responsible for creating a mess. First and foremost is that Pakistan continues to use multilateral forum like SAARC to raise bilateral issues and remains very committed to a Kashmir first approach under which the full normalization of India-Pakistani ties cannot occur until Kashmir issue is settled. And hence, as a consequence, whenever Pakistan meets India, whether it is on the forum of SAARC or on SCO or in United Nations, it never forgets to raise Kashmir issue, which then creates a big roadblock. Any kind of political and economical integration starts with integration of the transport network. And under SAARC also, it was conceptualized that a regional transport agreement would be signed, but Pakistan did not support that transport arrangement, mainly because it would have provided India with land access to Afghanistan, and hence that whole plan collapsed. So after the regional connectivity plans of the SAARC was stalled by Pakistan, India decided to go ahead with Sub-SAARC Motor Vehicle Agreement, or also acronymed as BBIN, or Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Nepal Motor Vehicle Agreement. And this was necessitated because of the problems or the hurdles which Pakistan was creating in overall SAARC transport agreement. Now you should not think that Pakistan underestimates the importance of connectivity and regional cooperation, because if you see, at the same time it has signed a very extensive China-Pakistani economic corridor, which is all about transport infrastructure. But it is just too scared of India gaining any kind of prominence in Afghanistan. Apart from these two troubles which Pakistan creates for other countries, and hence it leads to the dysfunctional SAARC, is the support of the Pakistan to terror groups, and not just which are focused on India, but also against Afghanistan, and it also supports hardliner Islamist organizations in Bangladesh, because of which the relationship between Pakistan and Bangladesh have also soured. So these are the 3 reasons attributable to Pakistan which have contributed to failure of SAARC. But there are some factors for which India is also responsible, and that is the size of India. India is giant in this particular region of South Asia. And to appreciate the full extent to which India dominates, we have a comparison of SAARC countries in terms of population, area, GDP, foreign exchange and gold reserves, and armed forces personnel. If you look at India, it has around 70% of the population of this region, around 65% of the overall area, around 80% of the GDP of the region, around 85% of overall foreign exchange reserves, around 90% of overall FDI flowing into the South Asian region, and around 60% of overall armed force personnel. So you can understand the hugeness of India in context of South Asian region. And one of the key reasons for SAARC's failure is that India is much larger than all the others put together. This enormous size of India and power differential produces a sense of insecurity in India's neighborhood, and no other regional organization or group of countries in the world has flourished if it has a presence of such a giant. And to prove this point, we have another chart which demonstrates the share of leading country in the regional bodies. So we have ASEAN, EU. So in ASEAN, Indonesia is the leading country, which has 41% of the population, 42% of the area, 43% of the GDP. Similarly, in case of European Union, Germany is the leading country, which has 16% of the population, 8% of the area, 20% of the GDP, 1/4 of foreign exchange reserves. So you can understand that 2 of the most successful regional bodies, which are European Union and ASEAN, do not have any kind of giant. Whereas in case of India, in almost all the indices, it is more than 70 to 80%. In some cases, it is even reaching closer to 90%. And hence, this vastness of India in all matters ranging from population, area to economy induces a sense of insecurity. And one of the reasons behind success of ASEAN and European Union is the absence of any such giant. Another important issue is the way the geography of this particular region. If you see, India is large and it is also centrally located. But if you see the borders which the members of SAARC share with each other, India has border with each member of SAARC. But if you leave Pakistan and Afghanistan, no other two members of SAARC share any kind of borders with each other. For example, Nepal doesn't share borders with Bhutan. Bhutan doesn't share border with Bangladesh. Bangladesh doesn't share border with any other member of SAARC except India. So these are the two factors which have put other members of SAARC into a kind of anxious state. And hence, they themselves are not very optimistic about the future of the SAARC. So far, we have dealt reasons with respect to Pakistan and India which have contributed to the failure of SAARC. Let us now look at other issues, and those deal with disputes. Disputes dealing with boundaries and disputes dealing with water sharing. No region in the world can prosper if the countries in that region have disputed or troubled international boundaries. If you look at this particular region, India has disputed borders with Pakistan. Pakistan has a lot of dispute with Afghanistan. Recently, Nepal has published a new map which has created a new boundary dispute between India and Nepal. The boundary dispute between India and Bangladesh was just recently settled. So, although India does not have boundary dispute with Sri Lanka, but the Indian state of Tamil Nadu continues to feel strongly about uninhabited island of Kachativu. And also there is a matter of fishermen crossing the boundaries and being captured by each other's police. So these are the matters which frequently create problems among the member countries. Apart from that, there is a long-standing issue of water sharing. The region is gravely divided over the distribution and management of river waters. There is a water sharing dispute between India and Pakistan. Then of course India and Bangladesh have a long unresolved problem with respect to river. So these are the matters which create a roadblock in this region coming together. And then finally, you cannot underestimate the role of political systems in these countries. Differences in political systems also hinder regional cooperation. Because other than India, none of the SAARC countries are stable or a secular democracy. And it is seen that more often than not, authoritarian rulers in the vicinity of India try to utilize and even whip up anti-India sentiments to gain political mileage. And hence, unless and until in the South Asian region democracy takes a strong hold, the future of SAARC as a homogeneous and successful regional group will always be questionable.
And so that is where the today's editorial becomes very relevant as well as important, because it tries to showcase some of the policies of India which point towards duplicity, and also it tries to highlight the significance of the SAARC for the future of not just India but South Asian region taken together. And all of that leads to why we still need SAARC, why we can't do good without the success of the SAARC. And let us understand the main arguments put forth by the author. So the failure of the SAARC in general and the dispute or the acrimony between Pakistan and India from last 2 decades has resulted into fragmentation of the South Asia, because if you can't call all the members on a single table, you can't establish a cordial relation. And so, as a result of that, most countries in this particular region have resorted to smaller regional groupings. Also, when a powerful nation outside of the SAARC or South Asian region wants to formulate a policy or any other organization or a regional grouping, they also resort to these fragmented groups rather than approaching South Asian region in the form of SAARC or all of them in together.
Now, India's problems with Pakistan on terrorism, territorial claims, and its role in blocking SAARC initiatives on connectivity and trade are well known. But if you look at how China behaves, especially with respect to the initiatives and the interests of India, they are quite similar. We have an ongoing border trouble with China, and we also know that how openly and actively China supports Pakistan. But that has not resulted into any stoppage or cessation of talks between India and China. India has regularly participated in Shanghai Cooperation Organization's meetings, and also the top leadership of India and China have met bilaterally whenever they were part of a common organization's meeting or a grouping's meeting, for example Russia, India, China, or even in G20. Whenever they have participated, they have conducted a bilateral meeting. And so according to the author, why is this privilege being given to China and being denied to Pakistan when both of them are equally detrimental to the interests of India? So essentially, according to the author, what it does is that it provides immense power in the hands of Pakistan, and it is like a veto being given in the hands of Pakistan, which is always used very efficiently by Pakistan to throttle any initiative to form a regional grouping. Then, according to the author, the challenges brought by COVID-19 pandemic are quite unique. And if you consider the uniqueness of South Asian region, given the population density, the culture, and education and income level of this region, the challenges are quite unique. And to be able to counter these challenges very efficiently, according to the author, a coordination among these South Asian region countries is a must. And so that adds another point in favor of why we need or why we still need SAARC. Then author puts forward a very interesting point, and that deals with the outrage against globalization throughout the world. If you see, a lot of political forces have cropped up which are quite anti globalization, or they want to go back, and so most countries are resorting to regional groupings and to enable preferences to the regional trades. And that is why you have so many trade blocs emerging across the world. But if you look at the South Asian region, the only regional trade bloc which can be conceptualized in this part of the world is SAARC. There is nothing else. And so, if we let this particular initiative die, then ultimately it is in benefit of no one in this region. And then finally, SAARC is our best bet to counter the increasing influence of China in South Asian region. Throughout our discussion videos in DNS, you must have gone through a lot of discussions which indicate how China is ingraining itself and asserting itself in South Asian region. Be it Maldives, be it Nepal, be it Bangladesh, you will see that China is the lead investor, trade partner, as well as most tourists arrive from there. And so to counter the increasing threat from China, we need to form a group so that our neighbors don't toe the Chinese line when push comes to shove, which has not been the case in the recent past. Nepal, despite having such good relations with India, has started to openly toe Chinese line in past 2 to 3 years. Pakistan has always been alongside China. Bangladesh, although maintains neutrality, but appears to be tilted towards China. So, these are our territorial neighbors which share long boundaries with our country, share common links, common cultural, lingual links with India, but still toe the Chinese line. And so, according to the author, if we enable a SAARC which is functioning, which facilitates trade, connectivity, so that is how we are going to counter the Chinese threat in this particular region. So that is why we need SAARC. If UPSC asks a question in mains examination, why SAARC is still relevant, you are going to mention these 5 points. So this brings us to the end of the first discussion, where we started by first understanding the prelims related facts. Then we dealt into 2 important questions for the perspective of mains examination. First, although conceptualized on a very high note, why the SAARC has failed to deliver and why we still need SAARC. Let us now move on to the next discussion.
Now, this particular article appears on page number 6 in the form of an editorial. The article is titled as Strained Ties. The article that we are going to discuss here shall be important from the perspective of GS paper 2, polity and governance. In particular, it shall be important from the perspective of the section on separation of powers. Now, before we start discussing this particular article in much greater detail, let me first discuss the background. See, when we say territory of India, it basically comprises of two components. These two components are states and the union territories. The states are considered to be the members of the federal structure of the Indian Constitution. Accordingly, the Indian Constitution provides for the distribution of legislative, executive, and financial powers between the center as well as states. On the other hand, the union territories, they are directly administered by the central government. Some of the union territories include Jammu and Kashmir, Ladakh, Chandigarh, Puducherry, Andaman and Nicobar Islands, Dadra and Nagar Haveli, Daman and Diu, etc. Now, Article 239 to Article 241 of the Indian Constitution deal with various aspects of administration of the union territories. Now, presently, there is no uniformity as far as the administration of these union territories is concerned. For example, some of the union territories have been provided with the legislature. On the other hand, in some of the union territories, the legislature do not exist. Now, for example, we have set up the legislature for the union territory of National Capital Region as well as that of Puducherry. We have also provided for the Legislative Assembly for the Union Territory of J&K. Now, even though we have set up the legislature in these union territories, the power of the parliament to make laws with respect to these union territories is quite supreme. Now, for example, let's take the subjects placed under the state list. Now, normally, the Parliament of India cannot make laws related to the state list. However, in case of the union territories, the Parliament has been empowered to make laws even on the state subjects. Now, for example, public order, it is a subject placed under the state list. In normal cases, the Parliament cannot make law on this particular subject. However, in case of Puducherry or for that matter the National Capital Region, the Parliament can make a law on the public order even though it has been mentioned under the state list. So, setting up of the legislature in these union territories has in no way diminished the power of the Parliament to make the laws. See, as far as the Puducherry is concerned, Article 239A of the Indian Constitution provides that Parliament can enact a law in order to create a legislature as well as the Council of Ministers in Puducherry. This particular provision was not originally part of the Indian Constitution. It has been inserted through the 14th Constitutional Amendment Act. In pursuance with this power vested with the Indian Parliament, the Indian Parliament has set up the Government of Union Territories Act 1963. As the name suggests, this particular act has been passed by the Indian Parliament in order to lay down the procedure for the administration of the union territories. Under this particular act, the Union Territory of Puducherry has been provided with a legislative assembly as well as the Council of Ministers. So we have provided for both legislative organ as well as executive organ to govern Puducherry. This act also provides that the Union Territory of Puducherry shall be administered by the President through an administrator who in case of Puducherry will be called as Lieutenant Governor. Further, Section 44 of the Government of Union Territories Act 1963 provides that the Council of Ministers headed by Chief Minister shall aid and advise the Lieutenant Governor of Puducherry. At the same time, the Lieutenant Governor in case of Puducherry enjoys certain discretionary powers for exercising special responsibilities. But Section 44 is quite ambiguous in nature. This is so because it clearly does not highlight as to in what cases or in what instances the Lieutenant Governor can enjoy discretionary powers. So this problem with section 44, wherein it has failed to clearly delineate as to what are the extent of discretionary powers of the Lieutenant Governor, this in turn has led to a kind of tussle between the Lieutenant Governor and the executive government in Puducherry. Now, this particular tussle between the Lieutenant Governor and the executive government in Puducherry has repeatedly been appearing in news since 2019. This particular tussle is on account of multiple reasons. Here, in this particular article, we have basically highlighted mainly 2 to 3 differences of opinion. The first one is about the issuance of directions by the Lieutenant Governor in Puducherry directly to the government officials through the social media platforms. Now, when the Lieutenant Governor in Puducherry is issuing directions directly to the government officials, the executive government in Puducherry feels that the Lieutenant Governor is unnecessarily interfering in the day-to-day administration. The government in Puducherry believes that the Lieutenant Governor has adopted obstructionist attitude. The government also believes that these government officials should directly report to them rather than reporting to the Lieutenant Governor. Similarly, differences have also arisen over the appointment of the State Election Commissioner. See, in case of states, the State Election Commissioner is appointed by the Governor based upon the advice tendered by the Council of Ministers headed by the Chief Minister. The Governor of a state does not enjoy the discretionary powers over the appointment of the State Election Commissioner. So whatever advice is tendered by the Council of Ministers headed by the Chief Minister, the Governor of a state is required to comply with such an advice. But in case of Union Territory of Puducherry, as you can see, section 44 does not clearly highlight the extent of the discretionary powers enjoyed by the Lieutenant Governor. So accordingly, now differences of opinion have arisen over who should be appointed as the State Election Commissioner. More importantly, questions have arisen as to whether the Lieutenant Governor is required to adhere to the advice tendered by the Council of Ministers in Puducherry. Thirdly, deadlock has also arisen over important policy implementation issues. The government in Puducherry wants to implement a scheme for providing rice free of cost to the people belonging to the poor and vulnerable sections. But in this particular case, differences have arisen over as to how this particular scheme should be implemented. The government wants to provide the free rice by leveraging the platform of the public distribution system. On the other hand, the Lieutenant Governor believes that the free rice should not be provided through the PDS. Rather, this has to be provided through the direct benefits transfer. The Lieutenant Governor believes that if we provide the DBT for the free rice, where the money is transferred directly to the beneficiary account, we would be able to reduce the corruption, we would be able to check the diversion of the food grains. So multiple advantages are associated with providing the direct benefits transfer. But the question which arises here is whether this should be decided by the Lieutenant Governor or should it be decided by the executive government, because this is a clear case of how a particular policy has to be implemented. Should such a decision be taken by a democratically elected executive government or a Lieutenant Governor who is in turn reporting to the President of India? See, in order to resolve this tussle between the Lieutenant Governor and executive government in Puducherry, we have certain previous judgments of the Madras High Court. First judgment came from a single judge bench of the High Court in April 2019. This judgment of a single judge bench of Madras High Court was later overruled by division bench of the Madras High Court in 2020. See, whatever tussle which we are witnessing between the Lieutenant Governor and executive government in Puducherry, this is not something which is unique. The same has happened even in Delhi as well. The Supreme Court of India had given a judgment in July 2018 in order to resolve this political tussle. Based upon such a Supreme Court judgment, in mains 2019 we had this particular question. The question was whether the Supreme Court judgment can settle the political tussle between the Lieutenant Governor and elected government of Delhi. Examine. So based upon the question that was asked in Mains 2019, a mains question for the practice from this particular topic here would be, do you think the Madras High Court judgment can settle the political tussle between the Lieutenant Governor and the elected government in Puducherry? Give arguments in support of your answer. Hence, as part of this video analysis, we'll understand what were the different judgments given by the Madras High Court in the past, and thirdly, what was the Supreme Court judgment on the nature of relationship between Lieutenant Governor and Legislative Assembly in Delhi, and why we need to implement this particular judgment even in case of Puducherry. See, the question before the single judge bench of the Madras High Court was, first and foremost, whether the Lieutenant Governor can interfere in the day-to-day administration of the Union Territory of Puducherry. Secondly, can the Lieutenant Governor issue directions directly to the government officials? Now, in this particular ruling, the single judge bench of the Madras High Court ruled that the Lieutenant Governor cannot interfere in the day-to-day administration. The single judge bench of the Madras High Court also ruled that the government officials should not take instructions and report to the Lieutenant Governor. Rather, these government officials should report to the democratically elected government of Puducherry. The rationale behind such a ruling or judgment was, the Madras High Court believed that the legislature of Union Territory of Puducherry is on par with the state legislature. So just like how a state legislature enjoys power and autonomy, the same power and autonomy should also be enjoyed by the legislature of the Union Territory of Puducherry. So in a way, the Madras High Court felt that the roles and responsibilities of the Lieutenant Governor in Puducherry is almost similar to the role of governor in a state. Since the governor in a state cannot interfere in the day-to-day administration, the same should be applicable even to the Lieutenant Governor. So, as per this particular judgment, the legislature of Union Territory enjoys the supremacy over the Lieutenant Governor in Puducherry. However, this particular judgment of the single judge bench of the Madras High Court was in turn overruled by a division bench. This was done in March 2020. According to the Madras High Court, in this particular ruling, the legislature in case of Puducherry, it has been set up through a parliament under the law. That is, the Government of Union Territories Act 1963 has set up the legislature in Puducherry. However, the legislatures in the states, they have been set up under the Indian Constitution. Accordingly, the Madras High Court felt that the legislature of Puducherry cannot be treated on par with the legislature of a state. So, in a way, the division bench of the Madras High Court overruled the earlier judgment that the Lieutenant Governor cannot interfere in the day-to-day administration of the Union Territory. In a way, this particular judgment laid down that the nature of relationship between Lieutenant Governor, central government and the government of Puducherry is already well defined under the Government of Union Territories Act 1963. This has to be followed in both letter as well as spirit. The court ruled that the role of the Lieutenant Governor is to act as a kind of bridge between the center and the government of Puducherry. Normally, in course of action, there may be certain cases when differences of opinion can crop up between the Lieutenant Governor and the government of Puducherry. In case of such disagreement, the Lieutenant Governor is required to refer such an issue to the central government. The central government would then come into picture and act as an umpire and try to resolve this particular disagreement. The role of the Lieutenant Governor and that of the government in Puducherry is in fact intertwined by law. That means, according to law, they are required to work in close coordination. Since they are required to work in close coordination, the kind of nature of relationship between these two entities should be based upon the spirit of working in unison rather than based upon the division. Now, this particular judgment given by the Madras High Court was expected to streamline the nature of relationship between government of Puducherry and the Lieutenant Governor. But as we have seen, this particular issue has once again cropped up. This clearly goes on to show that this particular judgment has failed to resolve the political tussle between the Lieutenant Governor and the elected government. This is so because this particular ruling of the Madras High Court has number of questions unanswered. First and foremost, whether the Lieutenant Governor can interfere in the day-to-day administration. If such interference is allowed, to what extent the Lieutenant Governor can interfere. Secondly, it has failed to clearly delineate as to in what all cases or the circumstances should the Lieutenant Governor refer the issue to the central government, and whether this particular reference by the Lieutenant Governor to the central government, whether it should be used sparingly or can it be used on a regular basis. All of these questions have remained unanswered. So in order to streamline the nature of relationship, according to some of the legal experts, we need to apply the Supreme Court judgment for the Union Territory of Delhi even to the Union Territory of Puducherry. So what was the ruling of the Supreme Court? The Supreme Court clearly highlighted the primacy of the elected government of Delhi over the Lieutenant Governor. The Supreme Court ruled that the Lieutenant Governor in Delhi cannot adopt an obstructionist attitude. He cannot interfere in the day-to-day administration of the Union Territory of Delhi. So in a way, the elected government, that is the democratically elected government in Delhi, would have primacy over the Lieutenant Governor. But at the same time, the Supreme Court was cautious to highlight that the Lieutenant Governor of Delhi is not on par with the Governor of States. But if we allow the Lieutenant Governor of Delhi to exercise discretionary powers in an excessive manner, this would obviously undermine the democratically elected government in Delhi. Moreover, this could also be used in a politically motivated manner. Accordingly, the Supreme Court highlighted that the Lieutenant Governor of Delhi is bound by the advice given by the Council of Ministers headed by Chief Minister. Obviously, differences of opinion can arise between the Lieutenant Governor and the elected government of Delhi. Whenever such differences arise, such differences should be communicated to the President. Later on behalf of the President, the central government would come into picture and try to resolve such a difference. But if you give such a power to the Lieutenant Governor to communicate the difference of opinion to President at all the times, the Lieutenant Governor can misuse it in order to obstruct the normal functioning of the elected government in Delhi. So Supreme Court was quite cautious of what problem could arise in such a scenario. Accordingly, the Supreme Court ruled that this power of the Lieutenant Governor to refer a matter to the President of India, it should be used as a matter of exception rather than as a general rule. That means whenever the difference of opinion arise, first and foremost the Lieutenant Governor should try to resolve such a dispute with the elected government, and that kind of resolution of dispute should be based upon the spirit of cooperative federalism. It should be based upon the principle of mutual trust and confidence. In spite of following all the necessary protocols for resolving the dispute, if the dispute remains unresolved, only then the Lieutenant Governor is required to refer the matter to the President. So according to some of the legal experts, whatever judgment the Supreme Court has given in case of administration of Delhi, the same should be made applicable to the administration of Puducherry. This is what you have to know with respect to this particular article. With this, let us now take up the next article. Now, this particular article appears on page number 14. The article is titled as Inflation Slows Down to 4.59%. See, recently the National Statistical Office, it has published the inflation data for the month of December 2020. According to this particular publication, the CPI rate of inflation in the month of December 2020, this was around 4.59%. In the month of November, it was 6.93%. So as you can see, the rate of inflation as measured by the consumer price index, this has got reduced. Another important significance of this particular data is that I hope all of you must be aware that the Reserve Bank of India, it is required to maintain the rate of inflation below 6%. Now prior to this, the rate of inflation was below 6% way back in March 2020. So it is for the first time that since March 2020, the rate of inflation in India has come down to below 6%. This decline in the rate of inflation has basically been attributed to the decline in the food prices. On the other hand, if you look at the WPI rate of inflation in the month of November 2020, this was around 1.55%. But if you look at the CPI rate of inflation in the month of November, it was 6.93%. So, in the month of November 2020, there was great divergence between the CPI rate of inflation and the WPI rate of inflation. In fact, the same problem was highlighted even by the Economic Survey 2019-20. As you can see in this particular figure, the yellow line depicts the average WPI rate of inflation. And on an average in 2019-20, it was at 1.5%. But if you look at the orange line here, which highlights the CPI rate of inflation, the average CPI rate of inflation was in fact much higher at 4.1%. So clearly there is a greater divergence between WPI and CPI. Now, since this particular aspect of divergence between WPI and CPI was in news, accordingly in prelims 2020, we had this particular question. Apart from that, as far as prelims is concerned, one may get questions related to the differences between WPI and CPI rate of inflation, the concepts of headline inflation, core inflation, consumer food price index, and various other indices used for measuring the inflation in the Indian economy. Accordingly, from the perspective of prelims, let us focus on these aspects. I hope all of you must be aware that when we say inflation, inflation basically refers to a general and persistent increase in the prices of goods and services. Inflation is usually measured in terms of percentage. See, while measuring the inflation, we normally take into account the concept of point to point. See, the point to point here means when we want to measure the rate of inflation, we try to find out the prices of goods and services for a particular month of a year. Then what we do is we compare these prices with the corresponding month of the previous year. Now, for example, let's say you would want to measure the rate of inflation for Jan 2021. Now, in order to measure this rate of inflation, we are not comparing the prices of goods and services with the month of December 2020. Rather, we are comparing the prices of goods and services in Jan 2021 with that of Jan 2020. So, the point-to-point rate of inflation is the prices of goods and services in a particular month in comparison to the prices of goods and services of the corresponding month in the previous year. So, if we say that the rate of inflation in the month of Jan 2021, this was 10%. Now, this means that the prices of goods and services have increased by 10%, but that is in comparison to the prices of goods and services in the month of Jan 2020 and not in reference to the prices of goods in the month of December 2020. The inflation can be measured either at the wholesale level or at the retail level. When it is measured at the wholesale level, it is referred to as the wholesale price index, and when it is measured at the retail level, it is referred to as the consumer price index. The WPI is published by the Office of Economic Advisor under the Ministry of Commerce and Industry, whereas the CPI, it is published by the National Statistical Office under the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation. The base year for WPI is 2011-12, whereas the base year for CPI is 2012. The WPI measures the rate of inflation in basically three categories of commodities. These three categories are the primary articles, manufactured products, and fuel and power. Out of these three categories, the highest weightage has been assigned to the manufactured products. On the other hand, the CPI measures the rate of inflation in basically five categories of goods and services. These categories include food and beverages, pan, tobacco and intoxicants, clothing and footwear, housing, fuel and light, and it also includes a miscellaneous category. Miscellaneous category includes the services such as education, healthcare and transportation. So as you can see here, while the inflation in services is not measured by the wholesale price index, it is captured under the consumer price index. That is the first difference. The second difference here is, while the WPI gives the highest weightage to the manufactured products, the CPI gives the highest weightage to food and beverages category. So what would happen if there is increase in the prices of the food and beverages commodities? Now, whenever there is increase in the prices of food, such as say fruits, vegetables, food grains, etc., obviously this would lead to increase in both WPI as well as CPI. Which index do you think would rise by a much higher margin? It is the CPI that would increase by much higher margin as compared to WPI. This is simply because CPI gives a higher weightage to the food and beverages category. WPI, undoubtedly it would increase, but it would not increase by a margin which is equivalent to an increase in the margin of CPI rate of inflation. Similarly, if we take into account the increase in the prices of manufactured commodities, since WPI gives a higher weightage to the manufactured commodities, WPI would increase by a much higher margin as compared to the consumer price index. Earlier, the Reserve Bank of India used to target the WPI rate of inflation, but based upon the recommendations of the Urjit Patel Committee, instead of targeting the WPI rate of inflation, now the RBI is targeting the CPI rate of inflation. So when we say that the RBI is required to maintain the rate of inflation between 2 to 6% and ideally at 4%, we are not referring this to WPI rate of inflation, rather we are referring this to the CPI rate of inflation. A rated concept is a concept of the headline inflation. Headline inflation is simply the inflation in the CPI rate of inflation. That is, whatever is the CPI rate of inflation automatically becomes the headline inflation. However, when we are measuring the CPI rate of inflation, there are certain commodities whose prices are considered to be extremely volatile. Take for instance food and beverages categories. Now particularly the commodities such as fruits and vegetables. Now the prices of fruits and vegetables are highly volatile. The same goes with the fuel and light, that is say the prices of crude oil, petroleum, diesel, etc. The prices of these commodities are considered to be highly volatile. So when we measure inflation by excluding these volatile commodities, such as say if you do not take into account the food and beverages category, the category of fuel and light, then what remains is the core inflation. So if there is increase in the prices of food commodities, then the headline inflation would increase. However, this would have less impact on the core inflation simply because the core inflation would not take into account the increase in the prices of food commodities. Similar to that, we have a concept of the consumer food price index. The consumer food price index, it is derived from the consumer price index. It is once again measured by the National Statistical Office. The methodology, base year, everything related to the consumer food price index is similar to that of the consumer price index. However, in order to calculate the consumer food price index, we take into account the inflation only in the food and beverages category. In food and beverages category, under the CPI, we have 12 subgroups. Now, out of these 12 subgroups, for the measurement of the consumer food price index, we take into account only the 10 subgroups. So, 2 subgroups are excluded from measurement of the consumer food price index. These 2 subgroups are the non-alcoholic beverages and prepared meals, snacks, etc. category. So these 2 categories are excluded from the measurement of the consumer food price index. So when we say the CPI rate of inflation, this CPI rate of inflation has basically 3 variants, that is CPI rural, CPI urban and CPI combined. All of these are measured by the National Statistical Office. Similarly, we have other variants of the consumer price index, These three variants are published by the Labour Bureau, which comes under the Ministry of Labour. These three variants are Consumer Price Index Agriculture Labour, the CPI AL, it is linked to the MG Narega wages, then CPI IW, that is CPI Industrial Workers, this is linked to the DNS allowance, which is basically an allowance that is paid to the central government and the state government employees, and lastly we have the CPI Rural Labour. Each of these indices is quite specific for a particular section of Indian society. CPI AL, that is agriculture labor, it basically measures the inflation from the perspective of the commodities which are commonly consumed by the agriculture labor. The same goes with IW and RL. Now these are some of the important aspects which one should note from the perspective of the prelims examination. Next, on page number 7, we have an article in form of data point known as the unwelcome host. This particular article basically highlights about an international indicator known as the Migrant Integration Policy Index. This article is important from the perspective of UPSC prelims because normally in UPSC prelims questions are asked repeatedly with respect to international indices. See, there is no need for you to go into detail about this particular index. What you are required to understand here is who publishes this particular index and what are the indicators used. The Migrant Integration Policy Index is published by two globally renowned NGOs known as the Barcelona Center for International Affairs and Migration Policy Group. As the name suggests, this particular index measures as to what all initiatives have been taken by the countries across the world in order to integrate the migrants into their society. In order to do so, it takes into account basically 8 indicators. Some of these indicators are access to nationality, that is how easily can immigrants become the citizens. Family reunion, that is how easily can immigrants reunite with their family. Health, that is to what extent a country has been able to cater to the healthcare needs of the immigrant population. The extent of measures taken by the country to ensure the political participation of the immigrants, and so on. In the latest edition of the Migrant Integration Policy Index, almost 52 countries across the world have been ranked. And as you can see in this particular bar graph here, India's performance on most of these indicators is considered to be quite poor. This is what you have to know with respect to this particular article.
The last article for today's discussion is a lead article appearing on page number 6, the debilitating side effect of a flawed vaccine trial, where author talks about a vaccine trial or the clinical trial of vaccine of a disease which is known as human papilloma virus or HPV, and how that botched up vaccine trial was conducted in Andhra Pradesh over 23,500 girls between the age group of 10 to 14. And then author draws correlation with that vaccine trial with that of COVID-19 vaccine trial which is going on right now. But we have already discussed this topic in our Daily News Simplified as to what are the consequences, or rather the negative consequences of conducting trials phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 in such a short manner of time, and also giving approval to vaccine without paying heed to the proper data being submitted by the agency which has invented or which is manufacturing the vaccines. In this particular discussion, we are going to discuss some basics about human papilloma virus. Now, why we are going to discuss that is because UPSC keeps on frequently asked questions on diseases either which are in news or which are very important and impact a lot of people in our society. Case in point is a question which was asked in 2019, which one of the following statements is not correct. Hepatitis B virus is transmitted much like HIV. Hepatitis B, unlike hepatitis C, does not have a vaccine. Globally, the number of people infected with hepatitis B and C viruses are several times more than those infected with HIV. And finally, some of those infected with hepatitis B and C viruses do not show symptoms for many years. Although the right answer was B, so this particular statement is incorrect. All of them are correct. But what are the important takeaways from this particular previous year question? The importance is that you need to know about important diseases with respect to their transmission mode or how they are transmitted from one person to another. You also need to know whether they have vaccines, which is a way to prevent the disease, or treatment. And you are also expected to know about their symptoms. And so, human papilloma virus is one of the most commonly sexually transmitted infection, and hence it becomes important. So it is an infection that's passed between people through skin to skin contact, and it's so common that most sexually active people will get some variety of it at some point, even if they have few sexual partners. An interesting aspect of HPV is that some cases, or in most cases, it does not causes any health problems, but as we will see, it might lead to cancer as well. And so some types of HPV can lead to development of genital warts and even cancers of cervix, anus and throat. So as we have discussed in a previous year question, that we need to understand the transmission mode of any important virus. And so the virus that causes HPV is transmitted through skin to skin contact. So just like HIV virus is transmitted through some of the bodily fluids, this one is transmitted through skin to skin mode. And so most people get a genital HPV infection through direct sexual contact, including vaginal, anal and oral sex. Many people have HPV and don't even know about it. And so that is why it keeps on transmitting within the society, which means you can still contract it even if your partner does not have any symptoms. It's also possible to have multiple types of HPV in a single person, and you must know that there are around 100 types of HPV virus. In rare cases, a mother who has HPV can transmit the virus to her baby during delivery. When this happens, the child may develop a condition called recurrent respiratory papillomatosis, where they develop HPV related warts inside their throat or even airways. So what are the common symptoms of HPV? And so often HPV infection does not causes any noticeable symptom or health problems. In fact, 90% of HPV infections go away on their own within 2 years, and this data has been given by CDC. However, because the virus is still in a person's body during this time, that person may transmit this virus to other people. And so the problem becomes chronic when the viruses don't go away on its own, and that is when they cause serious health problems. These include genital warts and warts in throat. In some cases, HPV can also cause cervical cancer and other cancers of genital, head, neck and even throat. The types of HPV that cause warts are different from the types that cause cancer. So having genital warts caused by HPV does not mean that you will develop cancer. And so cancers caused by HPV often don't show symptoms until the cancer is in later stages of growth. And so that is where the role of regular screening comes into play in effective diagnosis of HPV. And so finally, it is important to know about the treatments and prevention. Just like most other viruses, the treatments are symptomatic, and so genital warts can be treated with prescription medications, burning with an electrical current, or freezing with liquid nitrogen. But you should always remember that these are just symptomatic treatments, and so getting rid of physical warts does not treat the virus itself, and so the warts may keep on recurring. If we talk about the cancer, precancerous cells may be removed by the doctor, and cancers may be treated just like other cancers are treated through chemotherapy, radiation therapy and surgery. A good news is that there is a vaccine known by the name of Gardasil 9, which is available for prevention of genital warts and cancer caused by HPV. But the easiest way to prevent HPV are to use condoms and practice safe sex. So these are some of the important information related to human papilloma virus from the perspective of prelims examination. Let's now move on to the question of the day.